Where there's thunder, there's lightning. John Nada. Female nature must be made to seem mysterious. It must be made out to seem that you have a chance. This way you will think that maybe you just haven't found the right one. Maybe it's just not your time. Maybe you should just keep digging and searching and looking. And by doing all this, they make sure that you are distracted. They make sure that you do not awake. They make sure that you do not go looking for the truth. Another trick is to convince you that because you are single, you should be depressed. It is like a crawfish trap, where you set the bait into the trap and the crawfish goes in after the prize, after the treasure, only to realize that it cannot exit, it cannot escape. It's stuck. The truth can also be depressing. And that is oftentimes why many people don't go looking for the truth. Because, to be cliche, many people can't handle the truth. It can be a depressing reality to find out about gynocentrism, to find out about hypergamy, to see all these things plain as day and in the light. In much the same way that it can be depressing and alarming to see the woman in a true form without her makeup, to see that it is indeed a trick and illusion. But there is freedom and emancipation in the realization that this is all an illusion and that none of it is real. That you truly aren't missing out on anything. That was kind of a thing I had to deal with in coming to the truths that I've come to, and in coming to the truths that many of you have come to. And depending on your background, especially if you came from a particularly religious background or traditional conservative background, and depending on the areas in which you grew up in, it could have been a really disconcerting reality. As you witness people getting married, as you witness people forming these strong bonds and relationships with another, this idea that there's something wrong with you because you're single. And I mentioned it on the program before, the idea that you don't realize the bullet that has been dodged. You don't realize the gift that you've been given, that gift of singleness, that gift of single-mindedness. The idea that you cannot be a whole person without someone else. But yet in reality, time and time again, how many of us have been in a relationship where we felt just as single, just as alone, if not more so? And yet how many of us have been single and not thinking about dating, marriage, long-term relationships, not even pursuing women, and have been more fulfilled and felt more whole in the pursuit of ourselves rather than the pursuit of another? There is freedom in Mgtow. In fact, there is a channel called Mgtow is Freedom. Shout out to John. And that is the bill of goods that I was once sold, especially in having gone to a religious college or religious university. The idea, and it was sort of contradictory. God was the one who fulfilled. God is the one who sustains and gives you everything you need, and apart from Him and outside of Him, all this other stuff is just add-on. And yet, the message rang clear that you were not a whole person. You were not a complete person. Even though the message was preached that with God you were completed, there was another gospel that they preached. You had to be married. You had to have kids. You had to have all these things to amount to a whole person. And so you can imagine the consternation that this caused. Not just with me, but with others. And people that I still keep in touch with who I went to school with, who at this time are now divorced or never got married, still buying into falsehoods and illusions that in order to be a whole person, you have to be married. But why do they do this? there is a point behind this. Society must sell you marriage. Society must sell you relationships. Because the more that you're plugged into the system, the harder you will work for it. But yet we all know the truth. We all know that we're not going to be any happier married. We're not going to be any happier in a long-term relationship. And indeed, our significant other, so-called, is not going to be either. All one need to do is go on a search engine, whether you're looking for it or not, and see all the gossip rags and news headlines. You'll never be or do enough for a woman. Just when you think you've reached the pinnacle, just when you think you've done enough, just when you think you've provided all that can be provided, look at the examples, brothers. What have we seen over the past months and years? I'm not Brad Pitt. I'm not Casey Affleck. I'm not Johnny Depp. And yet all these men suffered the same fate of an average man when it came to satiating and placating the women in their lives. It was not enough. They didn't have enough looks. They didn't have enough status. They didn't have enough capital. And yet that's what the red pill would have you believe. That's what PUA in disguise, PUA in disguise would have you believe. You just have to invest in your own SMV and raise your wealth, raise your physical stature in terms of bodybuilding, weightlifting, and be alpha bro. And yet, who were more alpha than these men? Who had more status and wealth than these men? And in the end, they fell like a normal mortal man. And yet, that's the whole point that a lot of us have been making, is it not? Doing all these things, at the end of the day, doing it for the gratification and doing it for the hopes that one will be validated by a woman. And in reality, not really going your own way. You're not going your own way if you're by proxy going their way and doing all these things to impress and still worship at the altar of gynocentrism. And then the Mgtow are accused of not going our own way. Why do you guys talk about women so much? Why do you guys bring to light all of these issues? Just go your own way. Shut up, basically, is what they're saying. And yet they won't let us go our own way. How many articles have you seen? Articles on TFM's podcast, articles on Raging Golden Eagles podcast, articles on Mgtow 101 and Sandman's podcast, Mountain Mgtow's podcast, and soon to come Simon Diamond's podcast. How many articles must we read about the men are dropping out, the men are walking away, Chicken Little, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. And the blame put upon us and the shame put upon us, and yet they know the truth, but they will never reveal it. They will never publicize it. There's a reason why we're walking away. And yet, if we're so insignificant, if we're nothing but a bunch of neckbeard basement dwellers, a bunch of non-desirable men, what's the concern? Why are you afraid that men are walking away? Why are you afraid of Mgtow? Why do you accuse us of being these losers and try to shame us, but out of the same mouth you beg for us to return to the plantation? Could it be that you need us more than we need you? You need us to shore up the infrastructure. You need us when Sally comes to the realization that Chad is not in it for the long haul and she needs a beta bucks. See, that's the whole thing. If we don't matter, if we're so insignificant, and you criticize us for speaking the truth and trying to awaken other men to the reality that they're living in, If your message to us is to shut up and finally go our own way, which, by the way, we're doing, why the articles? Why the begging? Why the pleading? We want to go Mgtow, but there are those out there that won't let us. You have to make your own way. This has been true since the dawn of time. And I'm not saying that you don't need help, outside help, or help from friends or family, but you cannot assume that those friends and family and that help will always be there, or that there will even always be help. You must be satisfied with your own personal accomplishments, because oftentimes the people that actually make things happen rarely get the credit. Another thing that's liberating and has been liberating about Mgtow is that people's opinions of you don't matter. I've met many people throughout my life, in college, the Army, my current work, and other jobs that I've had in the past. And yet all these people came and all these people went. I think out of all the people I've met in my life, and it could be in the thousands to the millions, there's only maybe one or two at the most that I keep in contact with and have regular discussion with. Those guys are true friends. Those guys are real friends, and their opinion matters. Those that are close to you, your family, if you are close to your family, those are the people whose opinions you should concern yourself with. But at the end of the day, the opinion of yourself is really what matters up most. Because as I said, these many people, they came and went. And at the end of the day, I live my life as I see fit. And where are these people to criticize? Where are these people to shame? What difference did any of their opinions make or matter to my life? Because it's of no consequence now. Mgtow is the great emancipator for many men. The trap you have to look out for is in the past, we looked for motivation to do things. We looked for motivation to better ourselves physically, mentally, and spiritually, to do it for a woman or to do it to get a relationship or to date or whatever the case may be, for the validation outside of ourselves. We did it to be validated by others. But again, these people will come and these people will go. At the end of the day, you spend the most time with yourself. You spend your entire life with yourself. And there is some lack of motivation. There is some losing of motivation. But then you find a new motivation, a long-lasting motivation. It's the difference between digging down deep inside and using a supplement to kind of artificially enhance oneself. While we're on that topic, I've been kind of frustrated here recently with my usage of time, and I've had to reassess that. If there are any Dutch listeners to the program, which I know John, the other John, Oblong, I think is the last name. I know he's a Dutch. He's a Nederlander. I would be interested in practicing my Dutch with you guys. I've been kind of putting that on the back burner, and it's been frustrating because I'll have time and then it'll just get away from me. The other part of that is to read more books. I've got all these books and all these subjects, and it's some of them so interesting it's hard to just sit down with one book because it's hard to decide which one to read. But that's another message I'd like to talk about more in depth at another time. Just having all these hobbies and these interests and things, but finding the time to fit them into your life. So if there's any Dutch speakers out there interested in helping me with that, and maybe doing something there, that would be much appreciated. And anybody that maybe has any tips on how to just sit down and spend some time in a book would be much appreciated as well, because as we all know, there's much knowledge in reading. I believe Simon told me his podcast starts probably on the 25th of this month, so you guys go and check that out and support him. Also, check out Mountain Mgtow if you haven't already. Support your smaller YouTube Mgtow content producers by checking their channels out and giving them a chance and listening to their content. You'll find that there are many gems in places that you would have never expected. That's all the time I've got for today. Remember, you're free to do as you're told.